So I know that you're excited for the playoffs. Cincinnati and Alabama, followed by Michigan and Georgia after that. So, first starting with that first matchup with Cincinnati and Alabama. So, I don't feel like anyone outside of Cincinnati is really expecting anything other than a Bama win. Your loyalties lie with Alabama, but make the case for why, if there's any reason at all, should Bama be concerned with Cincinnati?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Desmond Ritter is a real quarterback. Georgia didn't doesn't have a quarterback. Georgia can't score when I know they have one of the top scoring offenses. They're number two in scoring offenses, but that's because of their defense and that's because of their running backs. But basically, if you look at it, when tested, Stetson Bennett hasn't been able to do it, and so when you look at Desmond Ritter, he's got 3,200 yards. He's got 35 touchdowns overall, 30 through the air, 5 on the ground. And, it'll really test this Alabama secondary, I think, that hasn't been great. Like Georgia did score some points on them. Teams have been able to throw on them if you want to. It's been really tough to run on Alabama, but that's why when you have a quarterback like Desmond Ritter, who's mobile as well, that can stand in the pocket if you need him to, that can make throws, that is going to be an issue. I would also say that um, despite having their best game of the season against Georgia, that the offensive line for Alabama has been suspect this year, and Cincinnati has a really good front four. They've got a good set of corners as well. That if you make a mistake, they're gonna take advantage of that. Alabama is also going to be missing John Mechie, who is going to be out for the season, and so that's going to be a huge problem because that's Bryce Young's like fail-safe guy. When he needs a first down, when it's third down, he knows Mechie will get open somehow, and when he needs to make a contested catch, he knows Mechie will make the catch. Now, other guys are going to need to step up. Jamison Williams has been that threat, but that's going to be one of those huge matchups for those Cincinnati corners. Is that Jamison Williams one of the fastest guys in college football? And is he going to be able to create a mismatch? Now, all that being said, I still believe that Alabama is going to win this game. But if a team is going to give Alabama troubles, it's going to be Cincinnati in this first round, just based off of Desmond Ritter, because he's that X factor, just like Bryce Young was the X factor in the SEC championship game. Because you were like, oh, there's no way Alabama is going to be able to compete. They can't run on Georgia. They're not going to be able to, give Bryce Young time. Everybody kept on saying, including myself, that was like, hey, but if Bryce Young has a game, like that's the X factor. The X factor is a Heisman Trophy winner. Like that's going to be it for Alabama against Georgia. And so the same can be said for Cincinnati, where if Desmond Ritter has the game of his life, then they have a chance. Now, Alabama's putting out a bunch of 5-star, 4-star recruits out there, and Cincinnati's putting out a bunch of 1-star and 2-star guys. So eventually the talent and the ability to keep up with what Alabama is doing and be able, like, are you going to be able to stop Jamison Williams for 60 million minutes? I don't think so. Like, you're not going to be able to run on Alabama, but you can throw on them. And so as long as you're completing throws and not getting behind schedule, on first down and second down, then you've got a chance. Definitely have a chance. Cincinnati definitely has a chance, a legitimate shot, and that's because they have one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Desmond Ritter.
See, the way I think about it is, like Cincinnati's obviously a very good team, like you just made the case for, and they have as good a shot as anybody. But I still feel like it's Alabama, even if it's not their best team. It's still Alabama. It's still Nick Saban. He has whatever you've talked about it, weeks to prepare for this matchup. Do you feel like?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you're a fan of Alabama anyway, but looking at it from both sides, would you just looking at it think, yeah, even if Cincinnati's got this quarterback, this offense, they can do this. We're still going up against Alabama. They still have Nick Saban. It's kind of like Belichick in the NFL. You kind of give them that benefit of the doubt type thing. So, and I think Cincinnati is a 13.5 underdog. I know they're 5-0 against the spread, and their last five as an
Mm-hmm.
underdog. Defense obviously is
Mm-hmm.
very good, but
Mm-hmm.
what do you think this final score could end up being?
Well, I mean, Saban's 5-1 in these playoff games. That only loss coming to Ohio State a few years ago. This is their seventh playoff. They won those games by an average of 20 points per game, and the closest game was to Oklahoma. But against Oklahoma, they were up 28-0 at halftime, and they kind of started pulling guys, and Oklahoma started scoring, and it was never in question. It's going to be a matter of which Alabama team shows up? Is this going to be the Alabama team that only beat Florida by 3? Is this the Alabama team that lost to Texas A&M? Is this the Alabama team that beat Georgia?
Yeah.
Saban with multiple weeks to prepare has always been great. Except for that game against Ohio State where they lost, why he's 5-1 and not 6-0. So is it that Alabama team that shows up that's shaky, that is, this moment is too big for them? Or is this going to be a team where Cincinnati comes in and just realizes, oh my God, they're bigger and stronger than us, and this moment is huge and we're just lucky to be here? I don't think, listening to the press conferences and stuff from Cincinnati players and coaching staff, like they don't think they think they deserve to be there, and which they do. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from them.
Right.
But Alabama is a different animal, and the boa constrictor that I usually compare Alabama to really hasn't shown up this year. Right. Where they kind of keep things close and then wear teams down, and just eventually by middle of the third quarter, it's like, okay, we've gotten hit by these big dudes for 45 minutes. Like we've got 15 more minutes and I don't know if we can do this. And so I think it'll be close early, and I'm hoping that Alabama pulls away late. I'm thinking of something like, here's the thing. Alabama's going to score. This is a really good defense, but we saw what they did to a Georgia defense. So you look at the competition that they faced, and you would think that their toughest game was against Notre Dame, and they beat Notre Dame for Cincinnati. And so is Georgia tougher than Notre Dame? I think so. So if you look at common opponents, they don't have any, obviously, but if you look at, just who they faced and the way Cincinnati has kind of let other teams, lesser teams, hang around, were they bored? Were they just not into it for the first half and then they can turn it on? We'll figure it out. But I think this is something, I think it's high scoring. I think it's something where Alabama can put up something like 35 points. Maybe it's 35-21, like right around that number of 13 and a half, 14. Like I think it's right around there. That being said, I'll probably be wrong and they'll win like 42-7. Like, I could be completely wrong.
I can see that.
I've watched this team all season in Alabama, and they didn't impress me until the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
They didn't score an offensive touchdown until like 2 minutes left of the Auburn game. They lost to Texas A&M. They only beat Florida by 3 after having a 21-point lead that they blew and had to, it was tight at the end. So it's close with LSU, who's just garbage and is basically gave up on the season at that point. But also, I watched the SEC championship game, and I'm like, where the hell has this been all season? So I hate to dance around the question, but like I have no idea what to expect. Like I have no idea. Like I could definitely see a game where like it's the Michigan State game from a few years ago where they didn't cross the 50 until the fourth quarter. Like I could definitely see that. But I could also see where, Cincinnati plays this game like they're an underdog and they're pulling out trick plays and they're just throwing and throwing and throwing. And Desmond Ridder has a game, and this comes down to, the last quarter where, Bama does what they did against Georgia, where they score a touchdown quick at the end of the first half. They get the ball back in the second half. They score again real quick to begin the second half. And all of a sudden you're looking at a 20-point game and you're like, where the hell did this happen? So I think you could see there's so many things that could happen with this game, just because I think Cincinnati's a really good team, and I think Alabama still has a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I could see 34-21, something like that. I just feel like you said, maybe Cincinnati, because I was thinking, okay, maybe Cincinnati. I'm sure they're confident. I'm sure they believe that they can win. I mean, every team should think that way, obviously. But maybe they're going to come in loose. Maybe they're going to come in with this us against the world mentality. However that can pipe them up. Obviously, you alluded to it. You still got to play 60 minutes? Math, right?
Yeah.
You still got to play 4 quarters against a team like Alabama, who is, you would think, is going to be as prepared as they can be when you have Nick Saban and all that talent. So it should be interesting.
They're drinking the Saban Kool-Aid too. Like Alabama's been talking and saying how they think they're the underdog in this game because no one wants them. They're not really the underdog.
Right.
Like they're saying they're the underdog, but I think they want to be the villain. Like they know that no one wants them to win this game.
Exactly.
They know that everybody wants to see Cincinnati and like the cute story and like, oh, we want to see, oh, Fickle's great and all these guys are great and it's awesome to see the underdog and, oh, look at Cincinnati. and they're like, oh, no one wants to beat out. Everybody wants them to beat Alabama, and I think they're buying into it. And Saban is a great motivator. He's been
Yeah.
doing it for years, so they're not buying into the rat poison, which is great.
This reminds me, I've been watching Man in the Arena, that Tom Brady documentary, and I've
Hmm.
been kind of going or watching through where they were kind of that underdog against the Rams the first time, and then it was against the Giants when it was the tables turned. So it's kind of reminding me of some of that as well. But great segue when you mentioned about like the story of Cincinnati and then the big bad Alabama. So again, you're an Alabama fan, but and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so definitely correct me if I don't get this right. But I think during the college football season, not that you were against Cincinnati as a playoff team, but you were kind of talking about like, their level of competition as opposed, against the traditional powers and teams like that. So
Hmm.
obviously, not taking anything away from Cincinnati, but I agree with you in the sense of like, I don't expect them to win in large part because, the competition, Alabama, all that aside. But anyway, looking at this matchup, do you think, as a college football fan, would you say that it's good for college football to have a non-traditional, like not a Power Five team in the playoff like Cincinnati? Does it kind of do something for the sport if they were to win or at least get to the championship game in terms of like that Cinderella March Madness type thing? Or is college football saying we don't really want this? We want the big, we want Alabama, we want Georgia or Michigan or just those type of teams. Like, where do you kind of come off on that?
Well, I think that this is good for this year, right? Like just because you don't have a lot of good teams. I mean, they're the only undefeated teams. Like there's a couple great teams, right? Like
Yeah,
Alabama we know is great. Georgia, Michigan kind of rose up from,
yeah,
being unranked to all the way, or not unranked, but lower ranked to
right.
all the way up. It's not a year where you have the traditional powerhouses are good. Like Notre Dame had a chance, but they lost to Cincinnati. Oklahoma State, the Big 12 kind of ate itself and they're out of it. Same with the Pac 12. They kind of ate themselves. And eventually, this is kind of like the right time and the right coach and the right players to do it. Where like if those UCF teams from a couple years ago that wanted a shot, it's like you guys aren't good. Like,
Yeah.
like good for you. Like, but this Cincinnati team is a legit good football team, and so I think they deserve it. I mean, they have a questionable schedule, but
Yeah.
I mean, any team they have a better schedule than almost all the teams in the ACC.
Mhm.
Like if Clemson would have gone undefeated, you would have looked at that schedule and been like, well, who did
Yeah.
they? I mean, who did they beat? So I think that because they added Notre Dame, they added Indiana, even though Indiana was early and it
Mhm.
wasn't. It ended up not being a good ad. I mean, you add these games, years in advance. You don't know what the teams are going to look like at the time. But adding Notre Dame was a big, step for Cincinnati, and I think they deserve to be there. Is it good for college football? Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it is because I mean the playoff is for entertainment. Like
Yeah.
it's cool that to win a national championship, it's awesome. But at the same time, like you're putting on a TV show
Yeah.
and you're putting on a TV show to entertain and like unless you get like the main characters where you get Saban and Dabo and Brian Kelly and Notre Dame or a Harbaugh and Ryan Day and like those are the main characters like Cincinnati like the feel good story of Cincinnati is something that obviously everybody's rooting for because no one wants, unless you are a fan of Alabama, you don't want to, like, you're actively rooting against Alabama
Yeah.
because you don't want to see the Death Star win again. Like, you're just sick of seeing it. And, but at the same time, dynasties rate really well. Like,
Yeah.
look, the Warriors ratings when they were winning, that rated really well. Like, all these college football games rate really well because people, as much as they hate seeing it, they watch it and they can't get enough of Nick Saban blowing up on the sidelines, even though he's up 21 in the fourth quarter. Like all that stuff they love. And if Cincinnati comes out and starts messing around and trying to win a football game, then people are going to jump on and really start rooting for Cincinnati. And if they beat Bama, hopefully they can go on and beat either Michigan or Georgia.
How big of an upset if Cincinnati were to win, how big of an upset would that be? Because 'Cause we've already talked about it. They're a really good team, and they're in the
Hmm.
playoff, so
Hmm.
technically it's like 50-50 kinda thing, but, I mean, it'd be a huge upset, right, if they somehow pulled it off?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Appalachian State,
Right, right.
Michigan from back in the day, but I would say that it would be up there just because it's a non-power five. going up against the Power Five, and that Power Five happens to be Alabama.
Yeah.
You know, like if this was the 2-3 matchup, and it was like them against Michigan, then I don't think people would be looking at it as
Right.
that much. But you're talking about Nick Saban, you're
Hmm.
talking about the powerhouse that is Alabama and how good they've been in recent years, especially in these games, like 5-1 in their last six by winning, by 3 touchdowns is insane. Like that's something that you don't see ever. So I think just because of who they would beat and who they are as a Power Five, as a Group of Five team, and not a Power Five team,
Yeah.
makes a lot of difference. But at the same time, like they're not a they're not even a 2 touchdown dog. Like it's a 13.5 point spread. It's a four. It'll probably get up to 14 by tomorrow or something like that because people will start betting Alabama, and I don't think it'll be morally it'll be more of a bigger upset than like on paper
Hmm.
it being an upset because you have a Heisman Trophy candidate in Desmond Ritter. You've got one of the best defenses in the country. You've got one of the best offenses in the country in this team. So it's just a matter of can they hang with Alabama for 60 minutes? And I hope not.
Yeah. So switching to Georgia and Michigan. So basically, was Georgia exposed in their last game, which of course was their first and only loss so far of the season to Alabama? And is Michigan, or really, are they exposed, or is Michigan in trouble because Georgia's coming in pissed off? Or basically, where's the barometer on this matchup for you?
The answer is yes. I think that if you look at it, like the only game where Georgia was tested was that first game against Clemson when it was 10-3. After that, they're winning these games by 21, 31, 62-0 against Vanderbilt,
Yeah.
34-10 against Auburn. I mean, 45-0 against Georgia Tech. Like these are huge, huge games that the spread, they were just blowing people away. And I think that they got a little bit comfortable and they decided that, this was our time and this is something that, we're destined to do. We're destined to beat Alabama this year. And they were never punched in the mouth. Like they were
Yeah.
like that Clemson game, like you watched that Clemson bowl game last night, that was garbage. Like
Yeah.
they're not good this year.
Yeah.
They're just not good. They'll be back, but
Yeah.
they're just not good this year. And so, I think teams are different than they are at the beginning of the season that they are at the end of the season. I think that you never saw them get punched and have to respond.
Right.
Like you never saw them down and have to come back and try to win a game. And so I think that for a lot of those kids, they just didn't know what to do.
Hmm.
And then you see Alabama across the field. You see Nick Saban on the other side, and you're like, oh crap! Like this is like we're losing, and they just keep piling it on. And then so I just don't think that they were used to it. I think they are going to be angry, but I think that this Michigan team, after the Ohio State win, is just as determined to win as they are. And I think that you're looking at two teams that are kind of the same, very strong on defense, very heavy against the run. They don't want to throw unless they have to, and the opportunities there. Michigan has started throwing the ball a little bit more towards the end of the season, mostly because they had to keep up. But you're looking at Hassan Haskins, for Michigan, who's got 20 touchdowns coming in, and Zamir White for Georgia, who's their running back. And this is just going to be like, I think this is just going to be one of those old school, like SEC type games where you're getting into a rock fight and you're looking at like 17-10 or something like that. Like not
Yeah.
very high scoring and not very, I mean, not saying necessarily entertaining, but
Yeah.
it'll be more, I'm hoping it's more entertaining than the first game because I'm hoping the first game is a blowout and I don't have to worry about it. But like this game to me, this is strength on strength. You've got the number one rushing team in the country in Michigan against the number one rushing defense in the country in Georgia. So something's going to have to give. And we saw against Alabama, like that Georgia's front could not stop Alabama from running the ball or throwing the ball. So do they run a similar? Does Harbaugh kind of tailor his game plan to that? Well, it's going to be tough because they don't have Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Like again, the X factor is Bryce Young. Cade McNamara is a decent quarterback, but he's only got 15 touchdowns on the year. Like they're going to have to come up with some stuff to try to confuse and try to, get this Georgia defense on their heels and maybe, run some coverages and stuff like that. And the Georgia side will have to run some coverages and stuff like that to kind of confuse this and force them into the run because they know all you can do is run. And if all you can do is run, all we got to do is stop the run. And this comes down to two quarterbacks trying to make a play at the end of the game. I don't know who I trust
Hmm.
more in this situation.
I'm assuming.
So it'll
Oh,
be an interesting game, but I just think that these are two very evenly matched teams that kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be closer, and I wouldn't. I think it's going to be Alabama and Georgia, and I think Alabama wins it all for what that's worth. But I wouldn't be as surprised, I guess, if Michigan were to win. I think Georgia will, but I was curious too. Pretty much my last question for you was, um, if Michigan does lose to Georgia or whatever, let's just say they don't win it all, or they don't win tomorrow.
Hmm.
Do you think that is everything kind of okay on the Harbaugh front? I know that he
Oh
is
yeah,
signed through 25, but we've always
yeah.
heard he can't win, but then he finally beat Ohio State, finally got to the
Hmm.
playoffs. So that's kind of settled,
Hmm.
I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, the problem with Harbaugh is he's never developed a quarterback at Michigan. I can't say ever because of Andrew Luck and Colin Kaepernick and
Yeah.
the other quarterbacks that he has, in previous stops. And so when you look at it, he just hasn't been able to recruit or develop that quarterback. Like you never have the Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback coming out of Michigan. It's always Ohio State or now it's Alabama or other schools like that, but you never get it out of Michigan, and that needs to change. If he had if he had if he had Desmond Ritter
Yeah.
in this game, right? We'd all be on Michigan because you're like, okay, well they're dynamic. Like they're the best rushing offense and they have a great passing game. Like they can make it happen if they need to. And I trust that quarterback at the end of the game. If I need one drive, I trust Desmond Ritter over, Stetson Bennett.
Mm.
I think the same goes for Kirby. Like if you look at what Kirby's done at Georgia, he hasn't had a decent quarterback either. Like he's had game managers, and that's it. Don't screw up. We're gonna have the ball a lot because we're gonna run the ball and we're gonna be really dominant on defense. But both these guys haven't been able to develop a quarterback. That being said, they're both in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
So I don't think the fan bases are upset with them at all, especially since this thing's going to expand to 12 teams in a couple years. Michigan can basically walk in. Georgia can basically walk in. Alabama is going to be able to walk in. Cincinnati, if they keep it up and they're in a conference by then, they'll be able to walk in. So, the fan base might be upset. I think him beating Ohio State finally and getting over that hump is a huge deal for him because I think he might have, not that he would have been forced out, but he might have been looking at other options if they didn't beat Ohio State. But since they beat Ohio State, they're in the college football playoff. I feel like the tempers have kind of mellowed a little bit
Yeah.
for Michigan. And look, I think they've got a shot against Georgia.
Hmm.
Like if you're
Yeah.
these teams are so evenly matched that both these defenses are really good. Both these running backs are great. These offensive lines are really good too. Like I don't know who to pick. Like I think I'm going to take Michigan in the points with this one just because it's it's over a touchdown right now. I'll take the under for sure. But I think that these two teams are so evenly matched, and I'm kind of rooting for Michigan.
Mm.
Like I would love to see Alabama, Michigan. Like I think that would be a good. Like I don't think people want to see Alabama, Georgia again. I don't want to see Georgia.
Yeah, I
again,
don't either.
you never know. It's hard. It's hard to beat a team twice. So I don't really want to see Georgia again. I feel like Alabama's got a better shot against Michigan.
Yeah.
So I would like to see Alabama, Michigan, but Alabama's got to get by Cincinnati first. But I think yeah, I mean, and also, who do you think the better coach is? Like, is Kirby Smart the better coach, or is Harbaugh the better
That's a
coach?
good question.
They both kind of had success. They both have won a Big Ten championship now, or SEC championship and Big Ten championship, respectively. Whatever. Like, they both have accomplished things that I don't know who the better in-game coach is because I have obviously Georgia's been in this situation before. They've made it to a national championship game. But Michigan's never been in this situation before. What's Harbaugh going to look like with 4 weeks to prepare for a team? So there's a lot of storylines going into this game too that I'm interested to see, and I kind of rooting for Michigan in this one because listen, regardless of the fact everybody's going to be rooting against Alabama the rest of the way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens. Alabama is going to be the Death Star. They're Freddy Krueger. Nobody wants them to win. Nobody ever wants Alabama to win except for me. So roll Tide.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking Alabama, and I could see Michigan winning. I'm kind of thinking Alabama, probably Georgia. Who knows? But either way, I think Alabama wins it all. So with that said, it'll probably be another Ohio, Michigan, Cincinnati type thing instead, which I don't think will happen. But how crazy would it be if it was Michigan and Cincinnati in the championship?
It
That
would
would
be
be
great. I mean, I don't think they root against Michigan the way Ohio State
nope.
does, but that would be. Because I wonder. Because then I think Cincinnati might be able to hang with Michigan or Georgia, but I don't know. We'll see what happens with Alabama. But I hope they don't win. I hope it's a blowout, at least by halftime. And yeah, I hope the second game's entertaining at least.
Well, I felt confident before that last game against Georgia for Alabama. I said they're gonna win, and then they won. So,
Yeah.
whatever. We'll see what happens,
I feel
but
like too many people are on them now. Like
I
it's like
know.
the jinx is reversing. There's too many people on Alabama now that I don't like it. I don't like the mojo. I don't like the way it's going.
I feel it
I need more people to be picking Cincinnati.
right, when you're a fan, when you have loyalty, it's like I get it. It's like that nerve you get nervous, and I'm looking at it like, oh, Nick Saban, Bama,
Well, yeah, and like people are like, "Oh, you don't believe in your team. You don't believe." I'm like, "No, I watch this
yeah,
team every week." Like nobody was picking Alabama to beat Georgia. Nobody. Like a few people, but nobody was like, "Oh yeah, they got this." Like maybe to cover, but nobody was like, "Oh, they got this in a blowout. Don't even worry about it. It's Nick Saban. Don't even worry about it." It's like Georgia's the best team ever. Like they statistically had the best defense up until like week, 10 or something like that. It was crazy. So I don't know. We'll see. There's too many people on Alabama right now, though.
yeah.
Some more money's got to come in on Cincinnati.
And I'm assuming regardless of what happens with Michigan, we won't have any Harbaugh to the Bears calls anymore.
No, I no, God, no, no, no. Unless no, you see, the problem is he'll win it all,
Yeah.
and then people will say, "Well, he's done everything he's ever gonna do. You might as well try it again in the NFL," and we'll start getting the calls. My hope is that that Nagy is let go
Yeah.
because it would happen the same day as the national championship game because now they're essentially that's the same
That's
weekend
right.
now
Yeah. Yeah.
because they extended the NFL season. So we'll get the calls because Nagy will be let go on that Monday, or we'll get the report Sunday night or whatever, and then and then Tuesday if Michigan wins or makes it there. It'll just be all the calls. See, look at how look at it. He beat Alabama or he beat Cincinnati. Like this, we need Harbaugh. Bring him back. Come on, Waddle, call him up. Call him up. Like that's exactly how it's going to be.
That would be amazing if it was a Michigan coach and an Ohio State quarterback coexisting. That would be funny on its own, but
Yeah.
I don't think it'll
I think
happen.
they have a better shot of getting Ryan Day
Yeah.
or Sean Payton than they do Jim Harbaugh.